Next question, and we'll be wrapping up here shortly. I know we've gone over, but I think it's been very worthwhile. We've had a great panel, big panel, which is great that we had this many turn out, but man, it takes a while to get through all this. On this next one, I've saved probably the most controversial for last. And around this, it has a lot of strong feelings on both sides. And only because anybody on this issue could quote-unquote soapbox, I'm going to limit time to 1 minute to state your position as to what and why. Dave will give you a few seconds on the out, but we don't want to get people to ramble because I know it will. This has been a hot-button issue for a long, long time, and at the state level, state legislators always were able to say, that's a federal issue, I'll take a walk on it. That's up to the feds. It's up to the feds. Well, recently, the Supreme Court kicked the Roe v. Wade decision out, not based upon much as it said about a right to choose, but more back to states' rights. It's saying it's a decision the federal government shouldn't have made. It's a decision that should go to the state governments. So as a result, everybody, except for you, Bob Granger, boy, you get to take a walk on this one. But this is absolutely going to be a topic of discussion at the state level going forward. So we would like to know, people would like to know your position on the Roe v. Wade decision, what it means, and where you have a stance on the abortion right to life issue and right to choose issue, or however you want to frame that. And if you have any restrictions or nuances or caveats to what your position may be, good luck. I'll be over here.
Well, if you'll indulge me for a moment with just a quick story. When I was in high school, back in around the time of 1964, before Roe v. Wade ever was, there was a young girl who was a class ahead of me, her father was a minister. I don't know whether that had anything to do with it or not, but she decided that a butter knife in her vagina would take care of the abortion of her fetus. She never came back to school. I don't know what happened to her. For 60 years, that has bothered me. Nearly 60 years. And I can't imagine how alone she felt. I cannot imagine the fear. And I don't think we need to go back there, people. I was there. We do not need to go back there. If I have something wrong with this old body, and believe me, a lot of things go wrong with it, it's between me and my team to decide, my doctors, what happens. And for you to deprive my granddaughter of the opportunity to have that same privilege, you know what I say? You're coming into my family. You're telling us what we can do. You'll forgive my language. You can go to hell.
Next one.
So for me, it's pretty basic. I'm my body, my choice. I'm that way for that topic as well as vaccinations. I think that I should have control over what goes on with my body. If I need assistance, that's why we have medical teams and doctors to do that and discuss it with. I'm not going to be hypocritical and make you take a mandated shot when I don't want to have that, and I don't think you should have any control over my body and decisions that I should make.
I as well agree that I think women should be able to choose what happens with their bodies. We're going backwards, in my opinion, if we take those rights away. And I think on the comment was just made that people will find a way to do this anyway, which will not be safe in any way, and many will just travel to other places. I think women deserve the right to have medical attention for anything that affects their bodies, and so yes, that's where I stand.
Wow, I get to be the first one in opposition. I believe that life. If I'm elected to the when I'm elected to the legislature for my second term, I'm going to represent every Mainer from the youngest to the oldest. I don't think that a doctor should be able to decide to terminate his life, and I don't think a doctor should be able to decide to terminate an unborn life. I believe that God sanctions life and God takes life. So anything outside of that, I can't support. I understand that Maine has set law, but you're asking for my personal opinion. That's my values, and that's what I stand for.
I do not support abortion. I think it's murder. There would be possibly, and if a mother was carrying a child, and if it was a matter of life or death for the mother or something like that, maybe I would consider. But I'm not in favor of abortion.
Well, I have to say this is probably the first thing that we disagree on, Bucket. Since I came of age, I've been very firm on my stance on this. Women have the right to do with their body as they so choose. It's a very, very slippery slope when we give government control of our bodies with vaccine mandates as well, which I do not believe in. The government does not belong in our body. It does not belong making choices like that for us. Thankfully, in the state of Maine, I do believe the law is 28 weeks, yes, and that's considered viability. I very much agree with Maine state law, and I'm very happy to live in a state that also believes in that, and the Maine people have voted for to not allow women to make that decision for themselves is irresponsible, and it only causes more death. People say they're pro-life, but what about the life of the woman who has a life? And the fetus isn't viable up to 28 weeks, so they say. I'm very firm on this stance, and I know Bucket is on his, so that's definitely something we disagree on.
I guess I get to skate a little bit on this one. In Maine, abortion is legal up until the point of viability. So those aren't cases that are necessarily going to be coming across the district attorney's desk. We're just not going to see it. As far as my personal opinion, I don't like to inject personal opinions into charging decisions or sentencing recommendations. I don't think you're given the law by the legislature. Your job is to enforce it, whatever it is, not to interject your personal opinion. So I'm not going to state my personal opinion on the issue.
Many years ago, when my wife and I decided to have our last child, we were both older. And as many of you know, I'm sure, the older you are biologically, the greater risk there is that the child that's conceived and born has any number of syndromes and birth defects and issues that make that child's life much harder. So we struggled with this issue. And we were worried through the amniocentesis, what are we, does our child have Down syndrome? Does our child have, any number of other things? But before we got to that point, we decided that child is ours. We conceived it. We're not going to have an abortion, regardless of what the outcome. That's my and Kendra's personal decision. I think that every human has the right to make that decision the same way we did. And if they make a different decision, that is absolutely their right. And I'll editorialize a little bit here. Many people on the right claim to be very supportive of the individual rights and the acclamations in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. To be supportive of individual rights in America and not be supportive of a woman's right to choose seems to me like the height of absurdity and hypocrisy.
I don't like abortions, but they are part of health care. And I think it's a very simple issue that health care decisions belong between the patient and the practitioner. And that's the stance that I have taken. And that's the stance that I intend to maintain.
So when this Supreme Court decision came out, I said to myself, wow, that's going to be a pretty controversial subject that we're going to have to deal with. Since that time, that decision feels like ancient history to me, and it's turned into nothing more than a Democrat talking point. The Democrats don't want to talk about people's oil bills, people's grocery bills, inflation, or anything that really affects people, and that's shown in the polls by the fact that this issue polls at a 5% concern among the general public. Now, the truth of the matter is, I hear statements like, we're going to move backwards, 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 like Mr. Throckmorton said. But the true thing that people need to recognize is that Maine has some very good abortion prohibitions in law. Prohibitions that have stood the test of time of both parties. And when the Republicans took control of all three houses for 2 years, in 2011 and 2012, they never touched those. And it was the same governor that they're saying is going to change it this time. The risk that people face, the true risk that people are facing, is an expansion of those long-held laws, is a betrayal of the people that stand by and overwhelmingly support those laws by the Democrats to erase those laws, like they did in the last legislature when they passed taxpayer-funded elective abortions, which is opposed by 75% of the public. So the danger here is to give Governor Mills and the Maine Democrats another term in the legislature, because just remember, this has been her on her best behavior for the last 4 years. That's the risk that the people face when it comes to abortion.
Okay. This, I'm going to give you a little story of my daughter's life. When she was 3 years old, my father-in-law sodomized her. Did she have a choice of what happened to her body? At age 19, in college, she was raped. She spent a month in the hospital. Did she have choice over what happened to her body? No. And I will not take away one other choice from her, should that have happened. When women and girls are not close to 90% of the victims of incest and rape, then maybe I'll rethink that, because then my daughters will have had a choice over their body.
I am 100% pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And I have a very dear friend that had an abortion over 40 years ago. I see this person every other day. And the hurt and stuff, the hurt in their heart and on their face is so radiant when I see that person that it breaks my heart. And I don't want to ever see any woman or girl ever have to go through this. There are other options. Adoption is an option. You know, there's a lot of loving families out there that would adopt a child. There's a lot of people that would come alongside a unwanted pregnant woman and help her go through that. Come alongside her and help her make a decision and stick with that decision. But, you know, abortion, that's not an option with me.
First and foremost, I totally support the current Maine law as it relates to abortions and have no plans on voting against any changes to the existing law. I believe all lives matter. While it may not be my choice, I feel a woman should have the right to choose what happens with her body, not only as it relates to abortions, but also vaccines or any other mandates attempting to govern her body. A woman's decision regarding an abortion should be between her doctor, and her higher being, not the government. And I feel the same for men as well.
it hasn't shown very often as we've talked today. Mary Ann did say I got something right. Our last forum, we went back and forth agreeing with each other on things. But this is my chance to agree with Mary Ann. At least mostly. It strikes me that we live in a country that we all learned way back in civics classes, those who had them, that it's a pluralistic society. People have different views, different faiths, and with that are going to have different definitions of when life begins, human life, etc. And with that, we need to find the way to respect those other views, to respect it in the law. Nobody is making anybody violate their principles by forcing an abortion. The choice is whether or not people can disagree about this issue for themselves. So I would very much like for this to be truly settled and stay settled and not be brought up as a divisive issue designed to score points. Let's let it stay settled. Let's let ourselves agree to respect each other's opinions for ourselves. And Mary Ann, thank you for including men in the issue of reproductive freedom.
And again, there are many issues that we left on the table. You know, we could talk about the inflation, as it was brought up, you know, the heating oil. There's so many real issues that are facing everyday Mainers that, quite honestly, we couldn't have enough time to discuss here tonight, nor could we come up with solutions. With that, it was an opportunity for us to get a chance to meet some of the candidates, and I want to thank Lupe again for recording this so we can get it out to more and more people. As we close here tonight, and Bob, this is your chance to shine, closing statements. This is what you lawyers do, right? I mean, this is it. We robbed from you all night, but now we're going to throw one right in your wheelhouse. We're going to give you a closing statement. But we will ask, all the people. We're not going to let Bob go first, though, Dave. We're not going to do that. We'd ask each candidate to stand and, if you would, give your closing statement as to why the people in your district should choose you on Election Day.
I have tremendous respect for my opponent. I don't agree with her on many things. Well, there are many things I don't agree with her on. So I guess the more accurate way of saying it. I would hope that people in this district will vote for me quite simply because they find that my views on things are more in line with theirs, and that they believe that the values that I have are more in line with their values. Now, we've had only a brief opportunity tonight to go into what our values and positions are. And it's my job to make it around to another, 15,000 doors, which isn't going to happen. But I'll get word out on how you can look up online where I stand on things.